In this video, we're going to introduce the notion of our costs and cost curves, the way economists look at them. And in particular, we're going to start off with what we call the short run. And so what do we mean by the short run? Well, the short run is a time frame such that at least one of your factors of production, one of your inputs, is fixed. You can't increase or decrease the quantity that you have. And so if we're working with here an example of a pizza restaurant, a pizzeria. And so in this case, they're using pizza ovens and workers. Right? We're just going to ignore the material inputs, the dough, the sauce, the toppings, all of that. Just ignore that for now to keep the example simple. And just say that they're using workers and pizza ovens to make certain quantities of pizza. Well, notice that the way we have this example set up is that there's always just two pizza ovens, right? Because in the short run, you can't just magically have a third oven appear in the restaurant overnight, and you're also not going to just get rid of it overnight either. It's going to take some time, right? So either to decrease or increase the number of ovens will take some time. Now, students frequently ask, okay, how long is the short run? Well, there's no single answer to that. It's going to vary by the industry, right? By the type of production process that you have. So you can imagine if you're an accounting firm and you've got enough space that you could add a few more cubicles and a few more workers, we say, well, how long does it take to get a new computer? And let's say that's really what you need, right? Is you have computers and accountants. And you look at that and say, well, you know what, you can get a new computer within 1 to 2 days. In fact, it's probably going to take you longer is hiring more workers. And so in that case, the factor that would be fixed really in the short run would be the number of workers. And however long it would take the accounting firm to hire more workers, well, that's what distinguishes long from short run. Right? We think, within a month, surely they should be able to hire someone, so maybe the long run there is 2 to 3 weeks. Well, what about for the auto industry? Now, if you want to significantly increase the number of cars that you're producing and you're already at capacity, well, how long will it take to either build a new production facility or expand one of your existing plants? That could take several months, if not years, to accomplish. So for that industry, the long run versus the short run, right, that cutoff might be a period of many months or even years. Okay? So there's no single answer to that. You have to think about it on an industry by industry basis. In this example, though, our fixed factor in the short run is the number of pizza ovens. So we have 2 ovens, and then looking at an example where we have between 0 and 6 workers. So if we're thinking about the costs of producing these numbers of pizzas, and that's what we have in our third column here, right, is that with 2 pizza ovens and 0 workers, you'll have 0 pizzas. With 1 worker, 200 pizzas. 2 workers will give you 450 pizzas. 3 will give you 550, and so on. Now, when we're looking at this example, we have to think about, well, so then what's the total cost associated with producing each quantity of pizzas? And a very important concept that we think about is average cost, right, where the average cost is simply total cost divided by quantity, or in other words, cost per pizza, right? How much is it costing this restaurant to produce each pizza at each different quantity, right, each total output of pizzas? Now, when we're thinking about our costs, though, when we're trying to determine, well, what is that total cost of production, notice that here in the short run, we can split those costs up into 2 pieces. We have our fixed cost and our variable cost. Okay? And so when we're looking at this, what we have here is, right, a fixed cost that's coming from our pizza ovens. Okay? And in this case, we're assuming that each pizza oven is costing us $400, and let's say that the short run is a month. Okay, or in this case, or even short run might be a month, and let's look at this as production of pizzas per week. Okay, so how many pizzas can they produce in a week? So if we're splitting this out, what we're saying here is that each oven is costing $400 per week. Now it's important, right, to remember that even if the pizzeria, if the restaurateur owns the ovens, right, so that maybe they're not renting them out, they're not paying an explicit cost, but there's still always an implicit cost when a firm uses its own capital in production. So what are we really saying if we're saying that each pizza oven has a cost of $400 per week? Okay, so then what we're saying, just assume 4 weeks in a month, even though it's slightly more than that in reality, but for 4 weeks per month, what we're saying is that either they're paying $1,600 per month to rent each oven, or that the money that is tied up in owning those pizza ovens could have earned a return of $1,600 per month if put to other use, right? Remember, that's the implicit cost of capital. Right? And that's something very, very important to always bear in mind, that you don't incur a cost of capital only when you're renting that capital, right? Owning and using your own capital has implicit costs for a firm. And so either way, it doesn't matter if this is an explicit or an implicit cost. Ultimately, what we're saying in this example is that the fixed cost per week per oven is $400. So with 2 ovens, our fixed cost is $800. And notice, right, why do we call that a fixed cost? Well, it's because it doesn't change with the number of pizzas. And it's like, look, I've got 2 ovens that I can use each week to make pizzas. This is what it's costing me, right, explicitly or implicitly, to be using those ovens. If I don't make any pizzas, I'm still having to incur that cost of $800 per week for those 2 ovens. I increase my output all the way up to a max of 640 pizzas. It doesn't change how much I'm paying for the use of those ovens. What does change, of course, is my labor cost. If I don't have any workers, then my variable cost of production is 0. And why are we calling it a variable cost? Well, because in the short run, the cost varies with the amount of output. And why is that? Well, that's because if I want to produce more pizzas, so if I want to go from 0 to 200 pizzas, I have to hire a first worker. And I'm paying that worker, say, $650 per week. So our labor cost here is $650 per worker. If I want to increase the number of pizzas I can make, I can add a second worker, and my output will go from 200 to 450. If I add a third worker, it goes from 450 up to 550, and so on. Okay. And so if we're looking at our examples here, and we're trying to, right, we're putting this all together now, and so I'm not going to run through how we, calculate all the numbers. You guys can do that. So what is our total cost? Well, it's fixed plus variable is equal to total, right? So my total cost when I'm making 0 pizzas and have 0 workers, there's still a total cost of $800 because of the cost of the ovens. Right? Now, the first worker, right? I add the first worker, I make 200 pizzas. That's now a labor cost of $650 plus the $800. That gives me $1,450. And then we go up to, right, 800 plus 13 is 2,100. 2,550. 3,400. 4,050, and then finally 4,700. Notice in each case, right, the total is changing by the variable, right? It's going up by 650 in each case here. So what is my cost then per pizza? Well, I have to take, of course, there's 0 pizzas if I have 0 workers, so that's not defined, right? You can't divide through by 0. But with that first worker, I'm making 200 pizzas. So if I take my 1,450 and divide it by 200, that'll give me a cost of $7.25 per pizza. Okay. Now, next, add the second worker. My costs go up to 2,100, but my quantity goes up to 450, right? More than double the number of pizzas. And so that comes out to 467. Okay. And then so on. If I keep calculating, then I've got $5. Then it'll go up to 567, 648, and 734. So what are we actually noticing here? What's actually happening? So if you look at this, right, my total cost, if I look at my total costs, right, so here's the number of pizzas. All right, so what's happening here? Well, I've got a fixed cost that's always at 800, right? But my variable cost is going up. It goes from 0 to 650 to 1300, right? But it's not going up in a straight line, really, because that's going for number of workers. So if I were to do this at, say, $200, $400, $600, some dashes in between for the other hundreds. So that first worker, right, gives me the 200 pizzas. So my variable cost is at $650 for the 200, and then it's at, with 2 workers, it goes $450, gives me $1,300. So that was that 800 there. So if I do, say, like 500, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, 2,500, and 3,000. And we're going to keep going up from there. So then to get this 450 pizzas, I had that second worker. My variable cost is now 1,300. Right? I add the third worker. Well, the number of pizzas only goes from 450 over here to 550, but now my variable cost is going up to 950. Okay. And then I add another worker. Number of pizzas only goes up to 600, but my variable cost is all the way up at 2,600. And you can see, so it's kind of increasing something like this is my variable cost, right? So my fixed cost is always at 800, but then my variable cost is increasing with the number of pizzas I'm making. And if you look here too, you can see that variable cost is increasing actually at an increasing rate, because the number of additional pizzas I'm getting is actually per worker is actually going down. And so if I wanted to plot the total cost, all I'm doing is I'm adding the two together. So if I'm looking for total cost, I'm really just adding this fixed cost of 800 to my variable cost, so it shifts the whole thing up. Okay? So that's how our cost curves, fixed, total, and variable, relate to each other. Now, another important thing to show here is our average cost curves. Okay? So plotting this now, right, dollars against the quantity of output. And if you look at this, as you plot this, what happens is initially, so if we do again 100, 200, all the way up to 6, right? At 200, my average cost, and I'm not going to draw this to scale here, I'll just say here's 4, 5, 6, and 7, since that's our range is between, about between 467 and 734. So to make 200 pizzas, my average cost is all the way up here at 725. To make those 450 pizzas, it drops to 467. And then at 550, it's coming down to we're going back up to 5. At 600, my cost is up to 567 now. And then that's going to go up to 648 and all the way up to 734. Okay. So what does my average cost look like? It looks something like this. Okay. You say, well, what's going on here? Right? Notice that initially average cost is decreasing and then it starts to rise. Why is it doing that? Well, that's because initially you're spreading out those fixed costs over more and more pizzas. Unfortunately, your marginal cost, as we'll show in a little bit later, is starting to grow because each additional worker is only adding a little bit more to your productivity. For now, what's important to note is that we think that average cost tends to have this kind of U shape, right? That in the short run, initially, you can get average cost to decline, to drop by increasing your output, but eventually your average cost is going to start to rise because you're constrained, right, by that fixed factor here. Okay? So you can keep trying to add more and more workers, but really there's only so much they can do if there's only 2 pizza ovens. So in the next video, we're going to continue working with this example, but we're going to focus more on our production curves.